Hi, I'm Kristen here at UT Southwestern Medical Center. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Facebook Live chat with Dr. Monica Trivedi. Today we will be talking about participating in clinical research, how you can get involved, what that means, as well as some ongoing research projects here at the Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care. And so first I want to say welcome to Dr. Trivedi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're happy you're here. As always, don't forget to like and share the conversation as we go along so we can spread this information elsewhere. And, we want to thank, first of all, the center for allowing us to use this space and for helping promote the chat. And if you miss it, we will be sharing it later this afternoon on YouTube. So don't feel if you can't sit for the whole thing, you're going to miss anything. So we're going to start. Dr. Trivedi, thanks for joining us. Could you tell us, what does it mean to participate in clinical research? What is a clinical study?
So clinical research can range all the way from trying to understand the diagnosis of a disorder, all the way to having treatments that are approved by the FDA or accepted in the field, and on the other end, even experimental treatments that are being studied in order to see if they can be available for larger populations. So it carries a whole range, but clinical research means that human beings are participating in that research to answer very specific research questions.
Okay. So why should somebody participate in that?
So I have to tell you, first and foremost, I have been a clinical researcher for the last 25 years, and now I was just calculating over 20,000 people have agreed to participate in my research, and I feel extreme gratitude towards these people, because without the agreement of people participating in clinical research, we cannot advance the field. We cannot find new treatments. We cannot find new diagnoses. We cannot actually understand the disease and improve the lives and health of people. So the participation of human beings in these research settings is essential. One important thing people should know is that any research study I or any of the other investigators do are monitored by an independent institutional review board that is made up of other experts, people from the lay public, as well as other stakeholders who independently review the project, ensure two fundamental things: that it is safe and it is answering a relevant question that's going to improve the health of people. Without those two questions, the IRB will not approve. They also look at other things that make sure that people have fully informed consent. They understand the nature of the study, etc. But without the help and participation of all of us now, we will not be able to advance the field tomorrow. All of the treatments we currently have available are a result of people before us who participated in this research. So that is why it is essential.
Good to know. So we're starting to get some questions in. And the first person, this kind of deals with what you were just talking about. And this is from Lori. She says, if I join a clinical trial, how do you protect my privacy?
So there are very many safeguards that are really designed to do that very thing. First and foremost, any information you give to us is protected by privacy, because the investigator is supposed to be the guardian of that information, and they cannot share it with anybody. In fact, if I have a person participating in my research, I'm not allowed to actually give any information to their spouse or their child unless the participant agrees for me to share that. So I am bound by the rules and laws. The IRB that I mentioned ensures that we make sure all of the processes we have in place, the computers, the files, the place where we store the information, is all secure so nobody can get it.
Gotcha.
There is also federal protection, so there is something called Certificate of Confidentiality. And most of us, all of us actually get that Certificate of Confidentiality from the federal government that also protects us from releasing that information against, even if somebody makes a claim for that information, we are asked and allowed to keep it confidential.
And so I know there are different types of trials. There's single blind and double blind studies. In many cases, it's my understanding at least, that you don't even know who the participants are. Could you tell us a little bit between the difference between those two types of studies?
So in terms of, let me first back up a little bit. There is the bucket of studies where we study the disease, and that is trying to understand their brain function, their blood function, the tissues that we are interested in, the symptoms they have. That is a group of studies which are clinical studies trying to understand the disease and developing diagnostic tools. There is no intervention, there's no experimental treatments, there's no single blind, double blind, we are really studying it. What you are talking about is treatment studies, where the treatment being given to the participant in order to understand its safety and its effectiveness can be done in many ways. One of them is open label, so that I know what you are getting, you know what you're getting, and we are just documenting its effect. There are obviously biases that kind of a study introduces, because if I know what you're getting, you know what you're getting, our hopefulness might affect the outcomes.
Right.
As a result, we do what is called blinded studies, and there are two ways people do. Most of the studies are double blind. I don't know what you're getting, you don't know what you're getting. But it is clear, though, it is not just anything. It is clear what are the options. And so generally it is 2 or 3 different treatment options. There are 3 different medications, say. That is very clear what they are, what their side effects are, what their benefits are, etc. are very clear. They're documented in the consent form. But I don't know if you're getting A, I don't know if you're getting B, or you're getting C, but it won't be something else. And same thing, you won't know. In order for us to not get biased with our hopefulness, etc., to affect the results is why we do double-blind studies.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got another question that's related. So Andy is wondering, she said that this is a good question, are there any risks when participating in clinical trials?
There can be, and you should be very informed about it. So this is the responsibility of the principal investigator to give you every chance and all the information that they have in order to help you understand both the risks and benefits of participating. I tell participants before they come or after they come that you should not participate in any research where you are not very clear what the risks and what the benefits are. And you should also make sure you know what to do when if there is a risk and something bad happens, what are the options. Those are always outlined in the consent form, and you should ask. And one important caveat to remember for participants is even if you have provided consent to participate today, you can withdraw that consent anytime you want, so that it is not like you are now permanently assigned and you cannot get out of it. You have full rights to remove yourself from that research anytime you want.
That's good to know. I didn't realize that. So you touched on this, but how do you, and this came in, how do you get involved in a clinical trial? Is it just a question of calling up and saying, I want to do this?
And I think that is where as a scientist, actually in some ways struggle with it. I would like for the idea that everybody has at least knowledge, information, and access to participating, so we get a truly representative sample. And we do our best, and others do our best, and the institution does its best to try to disseminate. So we put out flyers, we put out newspaper articles, we put out things on Facebook. Every which way we tell people that we are doing a study. For example, we are currently very interested in doing 2 large studies trying to understand the risks for depression so we can develop prevention methods. And we are trying to understand the long-term course of the illness, who will develop many episodes, who will develop fewer episodes, etc. So we are recruiting 2 large cohorts, one with people who currently have depression or bipolar disorder. And if they have the disorder, we are not going to do any change in their treatment. All we are interested in that study, we are recruiting 2,000 patients. We're calling it the Dallas Depression Trial. And there 2,000 patients will be followed for a long time, hopefully 20, 30 years, where we will just observe. We'll bring them in on a regular basis every 4 to 6 months and study their brain function with imaging, with EEG. We'll study their blood function with different blood tests. We will also do a lot of behavior tests, etc., to understand what is the course of the illness for depression and bipolar disorder. The other cohort we are developing is even more exciting. We want to basically stop depression in its tracks and develop prevention models. In order to do that, we are recruiting 1,500 young adults and children, 10 to 24, and studying the same phenomena to see if we can identify early indicators before somebody gets depression so we can intervene early.
Wow. So how many people are you recruiting for that study?
For the first one, we are recruiting 2,000, and for the second one, we are recruiting 1,500 people.
Wow.
We are doing all we can to disseminate this information across North Texas, anywhere, and if there are people who can help us spread the word more, we are happy to connect with them.
Absolutely. So if somebody is interested in participating in one of those trials, what are the requirements? Are there certain age ranges, certain demographics?
So the depression bipolar disorder trial, what we are just doing is 12 years of age and above, and everybody is able to participate. Those who are, for the risk study, we are going 10 years of age to 24 years of age.
Okay. And I know this comes up a lot, at least we've gotten this through Facebook before. People wonder, are they compensated? Is this something that they're here every week for years?
So we do compensate for the time that they have to devote to this, because there are some of the visits, they may have to be here for a couple hours, so we do compensate for their time. We obviously are not allowed to, and we wouldn't want to give compensation that goes way beyond that, because then it would be seen as coercion.
Right.
So we do it, but it is within the limits, and that is monitored by the IRB. They decide how much is enough and how much is not enough.
Okay.
And so we do compensate for their time.
Okay, good to know. So we've got another question come in here, and it says, what would early intervention for depression look like? Would it be medicinal, counseling, or something else?
It is a very good question, and the reason we are doing this is we don't know. And so for now, we are not actually considering medications, but we will do the studies to find out what are the best. So we are interested in finding out if physical activity or exercise is good enough. We are wanting to find out if therapy or counseling is enough. We're finding out if novel medications maybe, but none of that is actually currently known as why we want to do it.
Okay.
And most advances in medicine, like with cancer, like with diabetes and obesity, have come from prevention. And so it is time for us to start doing that for depression, because this is very common and it affects people's lives when they are young. A lot of people with depression have their first episode in their teens, and so then it really robs them of their potential, and we want to try to see if we can stop it in its tracks.
Well, you mentioned youth, and that actually is related to another question that I'm going to read it because it was a little specific. This one came from Jenny before our chat, and she said, how are you working within schools to help youth with mental health questions and counseling?
So that is a different project we have. We have developed a high school and middle school network in town. So we were in about 20 schools in the Dallas Metroplex. And we have introduced a 5 one-hour sessions in these schools called Youth Awareness of Mental Health. And these 1-hour sessions are interactive, where we are educating and engaging the high schoolers and middle schoolers to understand various components of mental health, mental fitness, mental awareness, and we are actually helping them acquire mental health literacy and also developing mental health fitness. This is an international program that had been used in Europe and has shown to increase awareness of mental health and reduce suicidality. So we are very excited about our partnerships with area high schools and middle schools. We are actually getting requests from other schools outside of the Dallas Metroplex also. And so this will help us educate and begin to see if there are resilience aspects that we are building into this. We are building other resilience boosting programs, like developing apps to engage the teenagers. And both of these programs will in the process help us identify those at risk for depression.
Gotcha.
And that is the group we will then study further and see if we can help.
Awesome, that sounds fascinating. So we're getting some more questions in. And this one is, do you study the effect of meditation on depression and anxiety?
We are interested in it. There have been studies with meditation in the past. People who are chronic meditators, that is, they have been doing it for many years. Their brain function is much better. Their cortical thickness, the thickness of the cortex in the brain, is better. We are currently incorporating that in our other studies, but I think our resilience boosting application will include meditation exercises.
Interesting. So you're creating an app.
Correct.
For meditation.
The app is multi-purpose, so meditation is one component that is an app to be used by our participants in high schools, and so it will include things like how you deal with bullying, how do you deal with stresses, how do you deal with SleepWake Cycle, physical activity, etc.
Interesting. Wow. Well, there you go. So we've got some more coming in, and one of these came in ahead of time, and she was wondering, I don't think you study this in their group, but she was wondering about research on OCD and other illnesses. And so which areas do you focus on here in the center?
This center focuses on depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder, but we have other people in our department focusing on obsessive compulsive disorder research. Remember, even while focusing on depression and bipolar disorder, a number of our patients also have associated obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, so those people will be studied also.
Okay. So we're about almost a little bit more than halfway through our chat. I want to thank everybody for the questions. Keep them coming. You know, I know we mentioned a couple different trials that you're currently recruiting for. I mean, what are some ways how do people get in touch with you?
So we have now created a lot of different portals for people to call us, talk to us, find us. So we have a presence on the website in many places on UT Southwestern website. So we have telephones, so 214-648-HELP, HELP is our number. There, like I said, you can Google Depression Dallas and UT Southwestern and find us, and there are
Still comes up.
web portals where you can send an email, and we will be glad to respond right away.
So I want to get back to this idea that we talked about earlier, and this is related to several questions that came in. You know, this idea that people really need to participate in order for science to advance. I mean, what does that mean? Why is that important?
Well, imagine if somebody right now has diabetes. The treatments we are currently using for diabetes to cure your diabetes came because 20, 30 years back, 50 years back, or 10 years back, a lot of people participated in research to prove that this treatment works and it is safe and it's effective. So our current treatment options available are a result of people participating in the past. If we now have people who participate now, their children and grandchildren will benefit from this, and society will benefit. This is to improve societal health. That's one thing. The other additional thing is, I think that imagine a particular group of people didn't participate. Let's imagine men decide they don't want to ever participate in this, and only women get studied. Then we will then find answers to disease and treatments only in women, and whether it applies to men or not, we'll never know, and then men will be left with no treatment. So it is also important for different groups to participate in order to make sure that we are understanding how these treatments work in every group.
Right. And when you think about them, I see your question, Manuel and Lori. We're going to get this. I'm just wondering really quickly before we get to those, when you're participating in a clinical trial, it's not always something that you have to come every day, correct?
Absolutely. I think that there are many different trials for different questions. Remember, let's go back again. Every trial has very specific sets of questions that the study is trying to answer. So in our case, for example, in our other study, the Dallas 2K study, where we are trying to understand the long-term course of depression and bipolar disorder, we don't ask people to come back more than once every 3-4 months. So, and that time we'll be arranging with them what is convenient. We often do it in the evenings and weekends if necessary. But there may be other studies where what you're trying to find out is a new treatment, new medication, does it work in 4 weeks? In that case, you may have to come back more frequently. So you should try to find out what are the conditions, what are the requirements for the study, match it with what you want to do, and make sure you ask questions. You should what I tell participants often is that at the end of agreeing to do this and signing the informed consent, you should be able to tell me what you're doing, what is the reason you're participating,
Gotcha.
what is the reason we're doing the study. If you cannot, then I have not done a good enough job.
Okay. All right, so we're going to take a couple of these questions here. One of them was from Manuel. He was wondering about if it's possible or how you treat depression and Parkinson's at the same time. Is that possible?
That is a very common problem, especially people with Parkinson's disease have high rates of depression, much higher than their age-matched comparison groups. There are actually studies, and it's an interesting question you ask, Emmanuel. There is a specific set of studies showing that in patients with Parkinson's disease, when they develop depression, there's a particular medication called pramipexole, which works in a slightly different way from, say, the regular SSRIs like Prozac and Zoloft. That medication, pramipexole, has been shown to be effective for that depression. So you should make sure you get a consultation from your doctor or your psychiatrist and make sure they recognize what are the current best treatments.
Okay. He followed up with another question. What about bipolar 1 and Parkinson?
Bipolar 1 and Parkinson's, there's not as much study, it is much less common, and so then you will have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, all right, great questions. So we've got one here from Jacob. It's a little long, I'm going to read through it. It says, can you talk about the work your group has done to address the issue of heterogeneous treatment responses in depression? And how close is the field to utilizing a patient-specific treatment course based on objective biomarkers?
So for my field...
Sounds like a scientist there.
I understand totally, because it is the most interesting, the most exciting question. So for my field, I think that is we have 30, 40 treatments available for depression. And sometimes it takes 2 tries, 3 tries before you find the right treatment. And my center is really focusing on actually developing blood-based markers and brain-based markers that we can use to precisely match a particular patient with a particular treatment. So, for example, if there are proteins in the blood related to inflammation or an immune response, if we can identify the pattern, so to speak, like a fingerprint of your immune response, and match you with that exact treatment, then we'll reduce the time you have to suffer and stop this trial and error process. So the exciting thing is, I think we are at the threshold now, because now our tools are much better than they were 20 years back. So our imaging tools, for example, provide much better resolution. We have long-standing understanding of it now. Same thing with EEG measures that measure electrophysiology and blood-based markers. And so we are at the cusp, I think, over the next 5-7 years, where our ability to match patients with the right treatment is going to be expanding by leaps and bounds.
Wow, really great question. Thanks for asking it. So we've got one here from Greg. He's wondering, do you consider SSRIs to be psychotropics?
So this is where I think that the kind of labeling often gets us into sort of blind corners. So yes, it is a drug that works on brain function. And psychotropics are also mainly drugs that are used in psychiatry illnesses, but they work on the brain. So yes, it is a psychotropic. There's probably 100 different medications.
All right, let's see. We've got a couple different questions coming in. This one's from Scott. It says, I'm a master's student at UT Health and want to incorporate data sets and behavioral intervention planning into my studies. My particular focus is on mental health and chronic pain depression. Is there anybody in your departments coordinating with non-clinical research?
We are doing, so our schoolwork is in terms of non-clinical, it is unclear what they mean, because non-clinical as in, if you're talking about basic science, working in animal labs and basic labs, yes, we are collaborating. If you're talking about outside population, for example, our network of primary care and pediatric practices in town is outside of UT Southwestern. We are also collaborating with high schools and middle schools, which is also outside. So there are people we are collaborating with all across, not only UT Southwestern and Dallas, but even across the country. And we've done some of the leading work in exercise, for example, on psychotherapy, on behavioral activation, TMS or transmagnetic stimulation. So we are interested in the entire spectrum of things related to depression, both in its current form and prevention.
Great. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I've got a couple questions here in the queue. The first one is, are depression and anxiety increasing, or is it just reported more often because the stigma is somewhat less than it used to be?
So it is always an interesting question. We have been improving our diagnosis and our certainty of diagnosis over the last 20 years. So therefore, a lot of the increase we see is just better diagnosis.
Right.
We are also really, the knowledge about depression has advanced so much that now people understand it to be a brain disease. They don't argue about it, and therefore more people go for diagnosis and treatment. So that is, both of those things mean that there is not an increase. Most evidence, both nationally and internationally, does suggest that the rates of depression are not profoundly increasing. There is only one minor but an important trend that should worry all of us, in that the rates of depression in teens has been shown recently to increase ever so slightly, but it has. So we have to keep an eye on that.
Okay, so we've got probably the last question here. This one is from Dan. This is something that I think a lot of people have wondered. Why don't antidepressants work on everybody?
So the short answer is antihypertensives don't work on everybody. Diabetes treatments don't work on everybody. Cancer treatments don't work on everybody. Antidepressants, we are not being very thoughtful if we think it should work on everybody. This is a very heterogeneous disease, and therefore a given medication may work on a subgroup, not on another. A second medication may work on the other group, but there may still be a small group of people for whom none of the current treatments available are perfect. As a result, we are doing research to find new treatments. That is exactly the reason we are in pursuit of new treatments. Depression should be seen as any other chronic medical disease, like diabetes and hypertension, and therefore we have to always be in the hunt for better treatments, and the reason we need to look for better treatments in hypertension is because not everybody gets better on the current treatments.
That's true. All right, well, I think we're going to call it a chat. We've had a great one. I want to thank everybody for all the wonderful questions today. I want to thank Dr. Trivedi for your time in answering all these questions. We really appreciate it. Don't forget, if you know somebody you think might enjoy this chat, please share it with them. It'll be available here on Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel later this afternoon. So keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, we appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.